Recording. Oh, look at that. We're recording. All right, so we're reviewing the text, Cecil, Plagiarism Gets You Fired. And the goal today is to practice the skill of reading like a writer. All right, here we go. We're going to read a text written by Leonard Pitts, who was a writer, not anymore, was a writer for the Miami Herald. So here's a context to the Cecil, Plagiarism Gets You Fired column. He is writing to a man who plagiarized this work, but he's writing in a very public forum. So a lot of what we do at the very beginning is we ask ourselves four specific questions, PASS. We're asking ourselves, what is the purpose of this text? Right? So if you're taking note, you're going to write that down. What is the purpose of this text? We're also asking ourselves, who is the intended audience of this text? So PA. Who is the audience of this text? I mean, it is a public column that anybody can read, but it seems to be addressed to Chris Cecil since it begins with Dear Chris. So that's an interesting approach, right? This is not a letter. This is not a letter. This is an actual column that is published in the newspaper. Okay, so it goes from Dear Chris Cecil, right? That would be the audience. Then the first S would be who is the speaker exactly? What kind of person is the speaker? Is he a writer? Is he upset? Is he frustrated? Right? What is the speaker like? And the other S would be what is the situation that is happening here? What situation is in the context of the text? So this is what we're thinking about. We're thinking about the purpose, the audience, the speaker, and the situation being displayed. Okay, here we go. Dear Chris Cecil. Here's how you write a newspaper column. First, you find a topic that engages you. Then you spend hours banging your head against a computer screen until what you've written there no longer makes you want to hurl. Or you could just wait till somebody else writes a column and steal it. That's what you've been doing on a regular basis. So let's talk about the first few sentences. So everything about reading like a writer is about evaluating the choices the writer makes. So we're asking ourselves, why open a column like this? First, why open with a letter? It seems like he's writing a letter to somebody, but in a very public forum. So maybe it's about public shaming, right? Maybe it's performative, like he's not writing to Chris Cecil, but he's letting us all know what he thinks while pretending that he's writing to Chris Cecil. All right. And then I got to ask a question about the first few sentences. Here's how you write a newspaper column. Why would a writer tell another writer how to write a newspaper column when they're both newspaper writers? Maybe he's insulting him a little bit. Maybe he's upset. Maybe the language is a little derisive. I think so. It feels that way. But then he becomes a little bit ironic, right? Or maybe there's humor in this section, of course, but it also feels very hyperbolic, right? You find a topic that engages you, then you spend hours banging your head against the computer screen. That's a bit extreme, but it implies something. Why use a hyperbole here? Well, it implies that writing is a difficult job that requires a lot of mental concentration. It requires a lot from you, and it's frustrating, which is why you're banging your head against the computer screen. So he seems to be implying that writing is the kind of thing that requires a lot from the person, right? And then he undermines that idea by saying, or you could just wait till somebody else writes it and steal it. And then he makes a direct accusation. That's what you've been doing on a regular basis, right? You can kind of tell his tone. You could just wait till somebody else writes it and then steal it. There's a sense of sarcasm here, right? There's a tone of derision. He seems upset, maybe frustrated. Are we picking up on the same tone? We are, right? All of us? We're nodding. Yes, we're nodding. Very good, very good. So that seems to be the implication here. That's what I'm getting from the first few lines, right? So again, I'm evaluating his choices to understand his purpose. That's what I'm doing. Okay. All right. So he's establishing a tone from the very beginning. It seems like he's upset with this guy. Now we're going to get some context. We're going to get some context to the situation because we don't know what's happening, right? Which further proves that he may not be writing directly to Chris Cecil because Chris Cecil he knows what's happening. But we don't know what's happening, which is why he's giving us context, right? So before Tuesday, I had never heard of you or the Daily Tribune News in Cartersville, Georgia. I wonder if that's supposed to be insulting, right? Like you're not important enough to even know who you are. Maybe, I don't know. Where you are an associate managing editor. Then one of my readers, God bless her. It's an interesting phrase, God bless her, right? I mean, he's happy that somebody told him what was happening. he matters in the community. So one of my readers reached out to me. Maybe that's the implication. Send me an email noting the similarities between a column of mine and one that you had, here's a big word, purportedly written, right? Supposedly you wrote it, or you have pretended to write it. So really, it feels like a column of mine and one that you had written. That's really what he just said, right? Now he goes into more background, more context. Intrigued, he's kind of narrating the steps. I didn't know about you. Then somebody sent me an email. So then I did a little research on the paper's website and found that you had written, he says, at least 8 columns since March that were taken in whole or in part from my work. Now, I, as Chris Cecil, could say theoretically, well, I didn't mean to plagiarize you. I just information, I made a mistake, right? Like plagiarism was not intended. It was all a big mistake. That's what it was. Okay, maybe. But he leaves no room for that because he uses very accusatory language. He says, the thefts range from the pilfering, these two words are related to each other, of the lead of a gangster rap column to the wholesale heist. So 3 words connected: thefts, pilfering, heist. They all show intentionality, right? A heist requires a lot of planning. They also show thoroughness, right? When you pilfer, it's like you go through people's stuff and you rummage and you find something and you take it, right? And they're also pretty negative words, like they denote someone who is malicious in their attempt to take your work, right? Now, he has a difficult job because he has to sort of reprimand Chris Cecil publicly, but he also has to make it so that we care about the reprimand. Okay. I want you to ask yourselves a question. I want you to be honest, right? I want you to be honest. Do you care about what he's saying? Because every time I do this piece, there's always somebody in the audience, somebody without a heart who says, well, it's not that big of a deal, right? And if that's you, that's okay. You are part of the audience he had in mind, which is why he's going to make it important for you so that you feel like the act of plagiarism, it's not cool. He has to make it valuable to you because you're part of the audience. And there are people who are going to be like, well, it's not that big of a deal, right? Let's see if he's able to do that. I believe he is. So the thefts range from the pilfering of the lead of a gangster rap column to the wholesale heist of an entire piece I did about Bill Cosby. In that instance, you essentially took my name off and slapped yours on, right? It's a nice little phrase, slapped yours on. Now he's going to provide evidence. He just made a claim. You stole my work. Now he's going to provide evidence. Okay. Now, here's the data, right? Here are the receipts, as you guys would say. On March 11, I wrote, here he's quoting himself, I like hypocrites. You would too if you had this job. A hypocrite is the next best thing to a day off. Some pious moralizer contradicts his words with his deeds, and the column all per right itself. It's different with Bill Cosby. On May 12, you wrote, he uses those quotation marks again. You know what he means by using quotation marks, right? He's not quoting, he's undermining. You know that? You guys remember that episode of Friends where Joey is saying, I'm sorry, and he's like, I'm sorry. No? You guys don't know that? You guys don't watch TV? You don't do anything? Okay. All right, that's pretty sad. Okay. On May 12, you wrote, I like hypocrites. You would too if you had this job. A hypocrite is the next best thing to a day off. Some pious moralizer contradicts his words with his deeds, and the column Alper writes itself. It's different with Bill Cosby. Hey, let me ask you a question. He just said earlier that Chris Cecil had plagiarized 8 of his columns. Why choose this particular example? If he's going to use one example, why choose this one? Anybody? You're being recorded, so you don't want to be that class that's very quiet and doesn't have answers. It's pretty sad. Where's that girl that had answers last time, all the time? Where is she? Kimberly. Where is she? Kimberly, what do you think? You like providing answers? No? Hmm. Rebecca, you look smart. What do you think? Elias, I'm coming for you next. Why use this quote about hypocrites? I just gave you the answer. What do you think Chris Cecil is? Say it, say it.
He's a hypocrite.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Who was that? Who says that? Who said that?
Me.
Who's me? Hi, me. Good job, me. Thank you very much. You're right. He's using a quotation that is ironic. It's ironic because Chris Cecil is a hypocrite who is, well, in this case, stealing from Leonard Pitts. He's not, Bill Cosby, and we all know what's happening there. But this idea of quoting this particular text is super ironic. I'm sure Leonard Pitts realizes how ironic it is, right? That the guy is stealing his work, but he's stealing a quotation that is about hypocrites who pretend that there's something they're not, like like Chris Cecil is pretending, right? So it's even more ironic when he quotes this. The one that really got me though was your theft of a personal anecdote about a moment I realized my mother was dying of cancer. Quote, the tears surprised me, I wrote. I pulled over blinded by them 7 days later. There you were. The tears surprised me. I pulled over blinded by them on central Kentucky's I-75. And here he says sarcastically, actually, it happened on an on-ramp to the Artesia Freeway in Compton, California. So, why use such a personal anecdote? He's used two. One, to showcase the irony and the stupidity of the situation, right? And to further criticize Chris Cecil and to blame him. And then he uses a personal anecdote about his mother dying of cancer. Why use a personal anecdote about his mother dying of cancer? What do you feel by hearing? Tyler?
To like make the audience feel like more bad for him, like more sympathy.
Tyler's my new favorite best person. Yes, exactly. I mean, you're reading this and you're like, oh man, like this guy is stealing his work. That's not cool, but it's not a big deal. And then you see that he stole your words while you were talking about your mother dying of cancer. Okay, now it's really not cool, right? You draw the line at moms dying of cancer, right? So I think there's something intentional about the choice of including this particular anecdote. That's what I'm trying to say. And I think he does it on purpose. I think he's got plenty of evidence to choose from, but he chooses one that really hits them in the pathos, right? I've been in this business 29 years, Mr. Cecil, and I've been plagiarized before. Now, maybe he's saying this for the sake of us, the other audience, who are like, hey, is this guy making a big deal out of this? Like, too much of a big deal? He's like, no, I've been here before. This isn't new to me, right? I have a thick skin. But I've never seen a plagiarist as industrious, hardworking, and brazen as you. My boss is calling your boss, but I doubt you and I will ever speak. By the way, this is the reason why he's writing it. I wanted you to hear from me. I wanted you to understand how this feels. Maybe that's why he wrote it as Dear Chris Cecil, because I wanted you to hear from me. Our bosses are going to talk to each other, and you and I are never going to speak. But maybe this is my way of sending you a message in a bottle, but also calling you out publicly in front of everyone, right? Because public shaming is always a good deterrent to misconduct. We should bring that back, public shaming. So he says, I wanted you to hear from me. Put it like this. Now he gives you a really big analogy, which is great. I had a house burglarized once, and I love this analogy because it's about invasion, violation of private space, right? This reminds me of that same sense of violation, same apoplectic disbelief, like I cannot believe it. That someone, and I love this line because he is very funny, had the testicular fortitude. You guys know what that means? No? Elias, say balls. He's struggling with that. Okay. Somebody had the balls to steal my stuff, right? Why not say it like that? I think it's interesting that he chooses testicular fortitude. I mean, he's upset, right? But not upset enough to not have decorum. And I think that's important to note, right? He's upset, but not upset enough not to be professional. Let's call it that. Testicular fortitude to come into your place and take what's yours. Not being a writer yourself, you won't understand. Oof, another insult, right? He insulted him earlier when he said, you could just wait until somebody else writes a column and then you steal it. And here's how you write a column. This is very demeaning and insulting. Now he does it again. You're not really a writer, so I know that you don't get it. But he says, I'm a writer. This all this is, but I am a writer. Now let's talk about how he shifts his diction to explain that he is a writer. I am a worshiper at the first church of the written word. That's an odd way of saying you like words and you like language and you like writing. He's becoming very poetic in his language. Why is he doing that? Is he trying to showcase his ability? Is he shifting it up to show us all the things that he could do? Look how nice this sounds. I'm a worshiper of the first church of the written word, a lover of language, a student of its rhythm, its music, its violence, its power. Isn't that pretty? Why does he do that? Is he flexing for us a little bit? Right? Like, I'm a writer. Isn't it better to showcase that you're a writer than to say, I'm a writer? Right? He's like, I've got the stuff. I'm a real writer. And I'm going to show you right now. Right? And he does it here. And then he gives you more. My words are important to me. I struggle with them, obsess over them. Show me something I wrote. And like a mother recounting a child's birth, I can tell you stories of how it came to be. Why this adjective here or that colon there. This actually kind of works as evidence too, because maybe the audience is thinking, how do you know he stole your words particularly? What if it's just like a big coincidence, right? Inadvertently, he is telling the audience, oh, I know what I wrote, and I know when somebody takes my words, right? You don't get it because you're not a writer, but that is how writers are. We obsess over our words. Now he's going to give you some of his, I guess, personal ethos. He's building his credibility as a writer, which is why you want to walk away. He wants you to walk away from the article liking him, supporting him, and disliking people like Chris Cecil. Not just Chris Cecil. He doesn't matter. He's a symbol for the lazy writer who takes other people's words and pretends that they're his own. See, my life's goal is to learn to write. You cannot cut and paste your way to that. You can only work your way there, sweating out words, wrestling down prose, hammering together poetry. I love this use of verbs, sweating, wrestling, hammering. How much labor is in those verbs right now? That's what writers do, because maybe you're thinking as an audience, I mean, you wrote something. What's the big deal, right? What's the big deal? People that are not writers don't understand how long it takes to write something. Um, how much you struggle over the writing of it, right? For those of you who have ever had to send an email to a teacher, you know what I'm talking about. You struggle. You're like, dear so and so, dear Mister, no, dear Professor, good morning, good afternoon. What if he gets it in the evening? Good evening, hello. I mean, you are struggling over your words for those of you who are writers, so you understand. It requires a lot. It feels like you're sweating out words, wrestling down prose, hammering together poetry, right? You are just the latest in a growing list of people in journalism now. Now he's widening the scope. We're stepping away from Chris Cecil and we're talking about people like him who don't understand that it's not okay to cheat your way across the finish line. I've always wanted to ask one of you, how can you do that? Have you no shame, no honor, pride? By the way, this is a real moral appeal, right? Do you not feel like he's being really morally judgmental in this particular moment? Right? This is about public shaming now. How can you do that? You don't have any honor, pride? How do you face your mirror knowing that you are not what you pretend to be? There's that word again, purport. He used it earlier. You had purportedly written right here. He used it here, and now he's using it again. It's all about pretending, knowing that you're a fraud. If your boss values his paper's credibility, you will soon have a lot of free time to ponder those questions, which is such an insult, right? That's what I love about this article. He asks him a ton of questions that imply that Chris Cecil doesn't have any self pride or worth, and then says, "Well, I guess you'll have time to think about it while you're unemployed," right? So he has maintained a tone of criticism and frustration, maybe anger, indignation. Now, you have to be careful when you're angry publicly because you can be so angry that people start thinking, all right, you're too angry, relax, right? So you have to have the right amount of anger. And you also have to make people believe that your anger is justified so that you can seem indignant, right? Which is righteous anger, not unrealistically angry, right? You don't want to seem that way because those people, you don't support those people. Too much anger, right? Do you guys remember the Will Smith slap? Anybody? Remember that? The slap, Will Smith? right? That's too much anger. Now, as he gotten upset, as he would have said, "Hey, stop making jokes about my wife. You do this every time that we're at a public forum, and I don't like it." Honestly, I think people might have reacted differently. Like I respect that, right? And he left it alone, right? He left it alone. That would have been okay. But then he starts yelling, he starts cursing, and then he gets up there in a very long walk, and then he gives him the most awkward slap I've ever seen, and then he walks back slowly. It's just too much, right? Like too much, too performative, too much anger. So everyone reacted the way we were supposed to react. Too much. Had he had the right amount of anger, we would have backed him. So, all right. So before you go, let me say something on behalf of all of us who are struggling to learn to how to write, which is great. He keeps undermining his ethos as a writer, and he keeps repeating this idea that Chris Cecil is not a real writer, and that he shouldn't call himself one of us, right? The dictionary is a big book. Get your own damn words. Leave mine alone. Gosh, what a great three sentences. They're very short, right? Very different from the rest of the syntax. The rest of the syntax so far, the way the sentences are written, has been longer, lengthier sentences, complex or compound sentences. But these all are very simple, very straightforward. Dictionary is big. Get your own damn words. Leave mine alone. And I love that he gets a curse word in there, damn. Although I don't know how much cursing damn counts as. But it is interesting that he finally gets it in there. And we all kind of feel like, you know what? You deserve that word. You can use it. You can use it, right? Do we not feel as an audience by the end of the article that I'm okay with you being angry about this? I kind of respect that. I think it's okay. I don't think it's cool what Chris Cecil did. If you feel that way, then the writer accomplished his purpose. One, to publicly shame Chris Cecil. Two, to persuade us that plagiarism is not a valuable skill. It's not a valuable trait. We should not do it, right? No one should do it. He has made us care about his particular experience and about the concept of plagiarism altogether. That somehow we shouldn't steal other people's, let's call it work for the sake of extending the conversation beyond writing, not just other people's writing, other people's work, right? And I love this little line right at the end because PSS only exist in letters. So he's maintaining the same format of a letter, pretending that it's a letter. Dear Chris Cecil, and then PS. You only do this in letters. Chris Cecil was fired, but it's crazy because now he's directly addressing us. Before it was Dear Chris Cecil, which felt like he's addressing Chris Cecil, but publicly. Now he's clearly addressing us because he's not speaking to Chris, he's speaking to us about Chris, saying that Chris was fired Thursday by the Daily Tribune News publisher immediately after he learned of the plagiarism. So, how do you feel when you get to that line? Do you feel like, yeah, good for you. I'm glad Chris Cecil got fired. Do you feel that? Yeah, you feel that a little bit? I think that's his way of letting us know. I'm sorry, that's his way of reassuring us that justice has been served. And I think we all feel satisfied with this concept that wrongdoing happened and that wrongdoing was corrected, right? So this has been a quick intro into how to read like a writer. How do I stop the video? I don't know how to stop the video. Pause recording. Bam.